Hey there, tankers! This is Dauntless Sam, and today we'll be looking at the history of the Panzer II and its driving characteristics in War Thunder. The Panzer II is the common name used for a family of German tanks used in World War II. The official German designation was the Panzer Kampfwagen II. Although the vehicle had originally been designed as a stopgap while larger and more advanced tanks were developed, it nonetheless went to play an important role in the early years of World War II, during the Polish and French campaigns. The Panzer II was the most numerous tank in the German panzer divisions, beginning with the invasion of France. It was used in both North Africa against the British and on the Eastern Front with the Soviet Union. The Panzer II was supplemented by the Panzer III and the Panzer IV by 1940 and 1941. Thereafter, it was used to great effect as a reconnaissance tank. By the end of 1942, it had largely been removed from frontline service, and it was used for training and on secondary fronts. Production of the tank itself ceased by 1943, but its chassis remained in use as the basis of several other armored vehicles, chiefly self-propelled artillery and tank destroyers such as the Marder II. In 1934, delays in the design and production of the Panzer III and Panzer IV medium tanks were becoming apparent. Designs for a stopgap tank were solicited from Krupp, Mann, Henschel, and Daimler-Benz. The final design was based on the Panzer I, but larger, and with a turret mounting a 20mm anti-tank gun. Production began in 1935, but it took another 18 months for the first combat-ready tank to be delivered. The Panzer II was designed before the experience of the Spanish Civil War of 1936 to 1939, which showed that shell-proof armor was required for tanks to survive on a modern battlefield. Prior to that, armor was designed to stop machine gun fire and high-explosive shell fragments. The Panzer II-A, B, and C had 14mm of slightly sloped homogeneous steel armor on the sides, front, and back, with 10mm of armor on the top and bottom. Many 2Cs were given increased armor on the front. Starting with the D model, the front armor was increased to 30mm. The Model F had 35mm of front armor and 20mm of side armor. This amount of armor could be penetrated by towed anti-tank weapons such as the Soviet 45mm and the French Canon de 25 and Canon de 47. Most tank versions of the Panzer II were armed with a 2cm autocannon. This autocannon was based on the 2cm Flak 30 anti-aircraft gun, and it was capable of firing at a rate of 600 rounds per minute, 280 rounds per minute sustained, from 10-round magazines, with a total of 180 shells carried. The Panzer II also had a 7.92mm machine gun mounted coaxially with the main gun. The 2cm autocannon proved to be ineffective against many Allied tanks, and experiments were made towards replacing it with a 37mm autocannon, but nothing came of this. Prototypes were built with a 50mm tank gun, but then the Panzer II had outlived its usefulness as a tank regardless of its armament. Greater success was had by replacing the standard 2cm armor-piercing explosive ammunition with tungsten cord solid ammunition. But due to shortages of tungsten, this ammunition was in chronically short supply. All production versions of the Panzer II were fitted with a 140 PS gasoline-fueled 6-cylinder Maybach HL62 TRM engine and a ZF transmission. Models A, B, and C had a top speed of 40 km an hour. Models D and E had a torsion bar suspension and a better transmission, giving it a top road speed of 55 km an hour. But the cross-country speed was much slower than previous models, so the Model F reverted to the previous leaf spring type suspension. All versions had a range of 200 kilometers. The Panzer II had a crew of 3 men. The driver sat in the forward hull. The commander had a seat in the turret and was responsible for aiming and firing the guns, while the loader radio operator stood on the floor of the tank under the turret. As the last of the developmental limited production series of Panzer IIs, the Panzer II-C came very close to matching the mass production configuration, with a major change to the suspension with the replacement of the 6 small road wheels with 5 larger independently sprung road wheels and an additional return roller, bringing the total to 4. The tracks were further modified and the fenders widened. Total length was increased to 4.81 meters, with a width of 2.22 meters, while the height was still about 1.99 meters. At least 25 of these models were produced from March through July of 1937. Continuing the conventional design of the Panzer II-C, the version F was designed as a reconnaissance tank and served in the same role as the earlier models. The superstructure front was made from a single-piece armor plate with a redesigned visor. Also, a dummy visor was placed next to it to reduce anti-tank rifle bullets hitting near the real visor. The hull was redesigned with a flat 35mm plate on its front, and the armor of the superstructure and turret were built up to 30mm on the front, with 15mm to the rear and the sides. There was some minor alteration of the suspension and a new commander's cupola as well. Weight was increased to 9.5 tons. 524 were built from March 1941 to December 1942 as the final major tank version of the Panzer II series. In War Thunder, there are 3 variants of the Panzer II, the C, F, and the premium DAK. All 3 versions weigh in at 9.1 tons and have 140 horsepower at 2,600 RPM, and have a top speed of 44 kilometers an hour. The hull armor of the 3 variants is 35mm at the front, 15 at the side, and 15 at the rear, except the F has 20mm of side armor. The turret armor of the 3 tanks is 30mm at the front, 15 at the sides, and 15 at the rear. The C and the DAK have 20mm KWK-30 cannons that hold 150 rounds, and the F has a 20mm KW-38 cannon and can hold 180 rounds. All 3 cannons have default penetration values at 25mm of penetration at 100 meters, 20mm at 500 meters, and 13mm at 1,000 meters. The C reloads in 7.2 seconds, the F in 7.8, and the DAK in 7.8 as well. All 3 have the same ammo belts available to them. The default belt is filled with alternating armor-piercing incendiary tracer shells and high-explosive fragmentation incendiary tracer shells. The SPRGR belt is made up of high-explosive fragmentation incendiary tracer shells, and the PZGR belt is filled completely with armor-piercing incendiary tracer shells. The PZGR-40 belt is filled with high-velocity armor-piercing tracer shells, which have a slightly higher penetration than the other belts. The Panzer II has the problem of being a good tank with a terrible gun. Penetrating anything with the 20mm autocannon takes knowledge of knowing where to aim, while also keeping the sights on the target. The tank chassis can take a beating, though, at the reserve tier, meaning that you have a better chance of getting a shot off on target while having a little more time to aim properly. As with all tanks, invest in spare parts and fire extinguishers as soon as possible, as well as the PZGR-40 ammunition so that you have a chance to penetrate your target at a slightly larger distance. I hope that this information has proved helpful. If you liked the video, please do like the video. If you'd like to see more videos like this, feel free to subscribe to the channel and check out the links in the description. If you think anyone else would like this video, don't be afraid to share it. This is Dauntless Sam. Thanks for watching.